Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We just want to let you know that we're waiting for everybody to come into the webinar. So we're happy to have you here. We're also going to ensure that our webinar is on Facebook Live so that you can access it later. So that's going to take a few moments for us to ensure that it is up and running on Facebook Live. So I'm in the meantime going to say welcome and thank you to a number of our VIPs here today, our local advocates. Thank you so much for being here. We have our board chair and vice chair, Sandra Rand and Ali Tunin-Talamo. We have Liz Peterson, the chair of our Skyline Council. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. Our local partners, Preservation Chicago, the State Historic Preservation Office, a number of municipalities. We so greatly appreciate that you're here to join us today for the release of our 2022 Most Endangered Historic Places in Illinois. So I'm just going to check. We've got about half of our folks coming in. So again, give us just a moment to make sure that we are all up and running. Looks like we're on Facebook Live. So welcome to our Facebook folks. And to make sure we keep this running, I will plan to get started. So as people come in, we'll make sure that we give them a great welcome as well. So to you, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us as we announce our 2022 Most Endangered Historic Places in Illinois. I'm Bonnie McDonald, President and CEO of Landmarks Illinois. And again, I welcome our large community of supporters and media partners here with us today. I want to remind you, our viewers on the webinar and watching via Facebook Live, that this presentation is being recorded. A full recording is going to be available to watch later on the Landmarks Illinois YouTube page, as well as our Facebook pages, so you can go back and see it again. Another housekeeping note before we get started, we have enabled closed captioning on this webinar. So to enable that feature, please hit the CC live transcript button that's on the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you would like to disable those closed captionings, you can click on live transcript button on the lower side, right side of your Zoom screen, excuse me. You can also grab the captions and you can move them to a different part of your screen if you want to make sure that you're seeing our wonderful presentation today. It's also best if you put the view option on speaker view for the webinar as well. And you can enable this by clicking view at the top left corner of your Zoom window. All right, I want to give you, again, a very warm welcome to everybody who's joining us, our media partners, our board members, Emeritus Board and Skyline Council members, our generous annual corporate sponsors, members, and local advocates. This is our preservation community, and we're so glad to have you here. For those of you who are not familiar with Landmarks Illinois, again, welcome. We love having you here. We describe our work as people saving places for people. Landmarks Illinois is the only membership-based historic preservation nonprofit organization serving people across the state of Illinois, the entire state. We inspire and empower stakeholders to save places that matter to them by providing free guidance, practical, financial, and policy initiatives and resources, and access to strategic partnerships. So for more information about us after the webinar is done, please feel free to access our website, landmarks.org, to learn more about our impact and our work. Over our 51-year history, we've helped to save 24,000 historic places all across Illinois, working together, again, with our local advocates, our community organizations, property owners, elected and appointed officials, and other municipalities. And we look forward to working with all of you that have joined us today, and we hope to inspire you to take action. Our Most Endangered list is our longest running advocacy program. We published the first list in 1995, and since then, we've brought attention to nearly 300 historic and culturally significant sites across Illinois, leading to hundreds of them being saved, rehabilitated, and reused. The places that you're going to hear about today are those that local advocates in Illinois have brought to our attention because, again, they're historically and culturally significant to their community, and they're in need of a preservation solution. Once we list a site on the Most Endangered Historic Places list, Landmarks Illinois staff is in it for the long haul. Our board members, our team members go as far as we can to aid all interested parties to help save these important places, often working for years or in some cases even decades to achieve a preservation success. And we thank our members, our foundation partners, our corporate sponsors, and our individual donors for your support to ensure that we can provide preservation resources to the people of Illinois free of charge. We also thank our media partners for your coverage today, which is key to bringing much needed attention to these endangered places. All of the information that you're about to hear and more will be posted on our website shortly after this presentation. Again, our URL is landmarks.org. I encourage you to visit the website to discover more details about this listing, past listings, as well as how you can take action. Now, members of the media will also find a digital press packet on the website, which includes local sources for each of the most endangered sites, including photos that can be downloaded and much more as well. And please reach out to Caitlin McAvoy, our communications manager, for more information. And before I begin, I want to recognize our staff who make this program possible every year. And let's start with our advocacy team, which includes Lisa DiChiara, our Director of Advocacy, and Quinn Adamowski, our Regional Advocacy Manager. Thank you. I've already mentioned Caitlin, but I want to give her special accolades for all of the work she does to work with our media partners and help to publish this information on our website. And our hardworking interns. We couldn't do it without you. Mikey Spain, for example, excuse me, from Loyola University's graduate program in public history. I know Ted Karamansky is with us today, who leads that program. Thank you, Ted, for all the wonderful interns. We also thank Jordan Gray, who is a senior at Loyola as well, studying public relations, advertising, and visual communication. Thank you so much, Mikey and Jordan. We also have an opportunity today for you to ask Lisa and Quinn questions about the 2022 listings at the end of this presentation. So all members of the audience, including the press, are encouraged to ask questions during the period, again, at the end of the presentation. And now I'd like to begin to share our 2022 most endangered historic places in Illinois. We're going to begin with what we believe is one of the most visually stunning and architecturally unique structures on this year's list, the former Will County Courthouse in downtown Joliet. Now, this was built in 1969 on the historic Route 66 corridor. The brutalist style building was designed by Otto Stark of C.F. Murphy Associates in partnership with Krugel, Healy, and Moore. And today it remains one of the lone examples of grand brutalist style architecture in the downtown and across the Joliet area. Despite its award-winning design features, including unadorned concrete exterior, trade concrete ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows, and more, the building is at risk of demolition. Now, a new county courthouse was built and opened in 2020, which replaced the existing 1969 courthouse and left it vacant. And the Will County board members have since indicated a desire to tear down the now unused public building rather than explore its possible reuse. A local advocacy group was formed called the Courthouse Preservation Partnership, formed last summer, and they launched a pro-redevelopment campaign, reuse, for the former courthouse. The group has urged the Will County Board to issue a request for proposals for redevelopment of the structure. Now, some of the group's members even presented their own reuse ideas. Thus far, however, the county board continues to pursue demolition rather than reuse. Another preservation challenge is that this structure is on land that is held in public trust by the county, and according to a 1961 court ruling, it cannot be used for private development. However, the advocates hope that the state legislature will amend the City of Joliet's incorporation to render the court ruling moot. Local advocates also argue that since historic preservation is an established public purpose, that the county could potentially lease the courthouse for redevelopment and preservation and still be within the limits of the court order. The Landmarks Illinois believes the real estate market should have the opportunity to propose reuse opportunities for the 1969 former Will County Courthouse before demolition is pursued. The county should issue an RFP for redevelopment to determine what adaptive reuse options may be available. Creative lease arrangements could potentially address that concern raised in the 1961 court ruling. Now, in February of this year, staff at the State Historic Preservation Office provided a positive opinion that the 1969 courthouse could be eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. The possible eligibility to be listed in the National Register provides developers the opportunity to propose projects, that would utilize the historic preservation tax credits. Now, reuse is a better choice economically, logistically, and environmentally for Joliet's architectural legacy and its people. Demolition would be enormously costly financially and environmentally. Now, I'd like to share a quote from a local advocate about the importance of the endangered site to the people of Joliet. Nicholas Macris, co-chair of the Courthouse Preservation Partnership, had this to say, quote, "The Will County Courthouse presents limitless reuse opportunities. Its large footprint and historic function as a multifunctional space provides for immediate adaptability, and it is located near downtown businesses. It sits on historic Route 66 and is flanked by multiple modes of transportation. It would be a travesty for the county to repeat past mistakes and not exhaustively explore redevelopment options." End quote. Now, you can help us and local advocates call for preservation rather than demolition of this iconic structure by contacting the Will County Executive and the County Board Speaker and encourage them to work together to issue an RFP for redevelopment, for reuse. You can also reach out to local advocates to give your support, your assistance, and also leads to potential developers. And the contact information for those local advocates is up on the screen now. Creative reuse and investment is also what is needed for our next 2022 Most Endangered site, the Elks Lodge number 64 in Rockford. The lodge was built in 1912 and it was designed by Chicago architect Lawrence P. Buck. For many years, it served as the local Elks Club meeting spot and hosted a number of community events. And it sits prominently in the West Downtown Rockford Historic District and is listed in the National Register of Historic Places, and it's a locally designated landmark. And I would tell you, you can't miss it when you go to Rockford. The lodge has, however, sat vacant since the 1990s when it was vacated by the Elks, and it has since had several owners who never utilized the building. And for the past 10 years, it has suffered deterioration due to a lack of maintenance and funding to make necessary repairs by the current private owner. The owner's plan to transform the space into an event venue has not materialized, and that's where we see it as demolition by neglect, essentially. Instead, the owner has accumulated more than $60,000 in city code violation fines. And the city of Rockford has taken the building owner to court, and a judge ordered that the Elks Lodge be demolished. Now, the building has continued to sit in limbo ever since, and local advocates do not want to see the Elks Lodge demolished. The architecturally significant site serves as a gateway to the Rockford historic Main Street, and it presents a unique opportunity to reinvest in the already booming area of the city. Local organizations, including Friends of Antioch and the River District Association, have been working with city officials in recent years to promote economic development in the West Downtown Rockford district, and they've been very successful at it. I hope you'll go and visit Rockford. Their efforts have resulted in the renovation of historic structures across the downtown area. And much of this renovation is thanks to financial incentives like the 20% federal historic preservation tax credit and the 25% River Edge redevelopment zone historic tax credit. Historic tax credits have already been mentioned as a key incentive, and we advocated to create them as well as protect them. The historic Elks Lodge developed in the same area of this downtown work that's been done, and is key to the reinvestment that needs to happen and continue to happen in Rockford. Its reuse would only contribute to that ongoing trend that's already happening in the downtown. Now, local advocates also believe the building has a variety of commercial reuse opportunities, especially with the use of these historic preservation tax credits. Now, the building's central location and nearby availability of hundreds of parking spaces additionally make it attractive for office, event, and restaurant space. Now, we urge those of you joining us today, if you or someone that you know may be interested in learning more about the opportunity to redevelop the Elks Lodge, please contact Friends of Antioch in Rockford, and their contact information is on the screen right now. This local advocacy group, which successfully helped advocate for the rehabilitation and reuse of Rockford's Zioch building, continues to encourage the Elks Lodge owner to sell the property to a developer who will invest and revitalize this high-profile downtown building. Sandy Cohn, president of the River District Association in Rockford, said this about the significance of the building. Now, quote, "The history of our beautiful downtown has been top of mind for developers and business owners in the River District, which includes the important West Downtown Rockford Historic District. The restoration of our past mixed with new development opportunities have made this community thrive. The historical significance of the Elks Club building is paramount to the continuation of this mission. And I, for one, cannot wait to see it back to the splendor of its past, ready for enjoyment of Rockfordians for generations to come," end quote. Our next 2022 Most Endangered listing is in Chicago's busy loop, again, in another downtown. This listing is made up of two historic high-rises, the Century and Consumers buildings located at 202 and 220 South State Street. The federal government has budgeted for the demolition of both buildings. 202 South State was designed by Hollibird and Roche, and it was built in 1915. Today, it's known as the Century Building. It was named after the Century Trust and Savings Bank that bought the property in 1917, 2 years after it was built. 220 South State was designed by Jenny Mundy Jensen, and it was built in 1913. And that building got its name for its first tenant, the newly formed Consumers Company. Now, both Chicago-style structures are today included in Chicago's Loop Retail Historic District, listed in the National Register of Historic Places. And throughout their history, they have been home to numerous businesses and storefronts. The building's current owner, the General Services Administration, acquired the properties in 2005 with the original intent of adding office space due to the building's convenient location next to the Federal Center. However, these plans never materialized, and the State Street buildings have since sat vacant. They also continue to deteriorate without a solid plan for reuse. And last month, GSA was allocated $52 million in its 2022 budget to cover the cost of tearing down these architecturally significant structures. In 2017, the city of Chicago agreed actually to oversee a request for proposals process to reuse, sell, and redevelop this Century and Consumers buildings and the two small-scale retail buildings that are located next door at 212 and 214 South State Street. The city selected a residential developer, CA Ventures, which is a Chicago-based real estate firm. And they included that proposal, included saving both of those buildings and the facade of 214 South State Street, preventing their demolition and providing a needed reuse for residential. These plans were halted by the city, however, due to concerns expressed by the judiciary in the adjacent Dirksen Federal Courthouse. While both the back sides of the Century and Consumers building face directly west towards the courthouse, GSA has assured the courthouse occupants that it could be addressing their safety concerns with design changes. And additionally, the developer's intent was to mitigate these concerns through those design changes. However, the city felt it could not proceed with the judiciary being unsatisfied with its negotiations in the GSA. It's clear that the court's safety concerns must be addressed if the Century and Consumers buildings are to be redeveloped and instead of demolished. Without compromise between the GSA and the federal courts, the entire half block will be demolished, leaving an empty hole in a prominent downtown State Street district for an indefinite amount of time. Now, this is unacceptable in the heart of Chicago's most important and historic downtown retail corridor. Michael Edwards, the president and CEO of the Chicago Loop Alliance, had this to say about the significance of the buildings. Quote, "The Consumers and Century buildings have stood prominently at the corner of Adams and State Streets for over 100 years and are part of the architectural and community legacy of State Street, one of Chicago's most important economic corridors. Their demolition would not only create a visual hole in the street wall, but their loss would deny this commercial district important revenues and vibrancy that would come with the rehabilitation and reuse. An empty lot on State Street does not make it a great street. The federal government should not be allowed to leave a black eye on downtown Chicago, end quote. Now, Preservation Chicago has also called attention to these State Street buildings on its Chicago 7 Most Endangered list this year. The Chicago Historic Preservation Advocacy Group has also generated an online petition to help save these buildings. Now, you can help us advocate for the preservation of these prominent State Street buildings by contacting Senator Dick Durbin, Mayor Lori Lightfoot, and GSA Administrator Robin Carnahan. Voice your opposition to demolition and the need to re-engage the court in a preservation solution that will satisfy its safety concerns. And their contact information is on the screen now. And for our next 2022 Most Endangered site, we are staying in Chicago. It is the Eugene S. Pike House, located in the Dan Ryan Woods on the south side, North Beverly neighborhood. Now, this building was designed by Henry Hale Waterman, and it was built in 1894, the historic home of today, owned by the Forest Preserve District of Cook County, and it has been known as the Watchman's residence, and it was once the Forest Preserve Superintendent's headquarters and residence. The house was originally built as a private weekend residence by prominent real estate developer and financier Eugene S. Pike. And it was designed by Harry Hale Waterman. In 1921, the Forest District purchased 32 acres of the Pike estate, including the house. The historic significance of the Pike House has been noted on the local, the state, and the federal level. And the house is included in the Illinois State Historic Preservation Office's 1970s statewide architectural survey, and it's a contributing building in the Ridge Historic District listed in the National Register of Historic Places. Additionally, it is orange rated in the City of Chicago's Historic Resources Survey, so it has every level of significance that's identified. Now, the rating means that the house possesses architectural distinction, and that orange rating means that it triggers a 90-day demo delay if demolition permits are submitted for the orange rated property. It is not protected by landmarking, but that would allow the community to have a say and to try to find a way to address the proposed demolition. Now, the building is a beloved community landmark in the North Beverly community, and it sits prominently on the edge of the Forest Preserve, facing a residential area on 91st Street. However, the Pike House has been unoccupied since approximately 2015, and it continues to suffer demolition by neglect due to a lack of funds for its maintenance. Now, the Forest Preserve did issue a request for information to the public in 2018 for potential interest in the use of the house, but no serious ideas with potential funding were submitted. And to date, no preservation solution has been determined for the property. The Greater Beverly community, led by the Beverly Area Planning Association and the Ridge Historical Society, is eager to work with the Forest Preserve and the public to develop a viable reuse solution and a rehabilitation plan for the historic home. And I know we want to thank the Forest Preserve District of Cook County for working together with us to address the opportunities around another request for information. So thank you to them for working together with us. Now, Grace Keichman, Assistant Director of the Beverly Area Planning Association, said this, quote, "The Beverly Area Planning Association and Ridge Historical Society share a mission to protect the history and architecture of the Beverly Morgan Park community. We have partnered in the effort to save the Eugene S. Pike House because of its significance to the history of both our community and our city, its importance as a design by noted architect Harry Hale Waterman, and its stature as a contributing structure in the National Ridge Historic District. The confluence of these factors is that this is a community that treasures history and architecture, and it's served by civic and government officials who support our endeavors to protect them for future generations and community organizations dedicated to preservation," end quote. Saving historic and older properties in forest preserves is a challenge, not just in Cook County, but in forest preserves throughout the state. This is just one example. We need long-term planning processes and intentional community input to find proper solutions to preserving and reusing historic forest preserves properties like the Pike House. There's also a need to reevaluate state policy, which is another reason we're listing this property, as forest preserve enabling legislation often only allows licensing agreements for outside users of these buildings, which can be limiting in their reuse options. Landmarks Illinois would like to address this policy issue with other organizational partners and Forest Preserve officials. And again, we are thankful to work together with the Forest Preserve of Cook County. Long-term lease agreements, or in rare exceptions, the sale of these historic properties and forest preserves may be the only way to ensure their preservation. We also believe that reusing older structures like the Pike House is a smart, sustainable practice that all forest preserve districts should engage in, supporting its mission. A demolition of these places disposes of buildings with embodied energy and durable materials like old growth wood that can never be replaced. We recommend the Forest Preserve District of Cook County work together with us and local advocates in recent months and continue working with us to find a preservation solution for the Pike House. And the Forest Preserve plans to release a request for expressions of interest this spring from parties willing to submit serious ideas for the new use and funding for the property. We ask that you reach out to the Beverly Area Planning Association to see how you can be involved in this effort. And please help advocate for the future of this endangered place. Contact information is on the screen now. Now, as you'll notice, public spaces are a theme on this year's Most Endangered list. And as such, our next 2022 endangered site is Gilson Park, a 60-acre prairie-style park on Lake Michigan in Wilmette. The park was created in 1915 and designed by Benjamin E. Gage, one of the earliest Wilmette Park District superintendents. In 1937, it was expanded and improved by designers C.D. Wagstaff and Robert E. Everly, who designed the park in a naturalistic style influenced by prominent Prairie School landscape architect Jens Jensen. Prairie-style elements of the park include a stone council ring, stratified stone walls and steps, curvilinear roadways and walking paths, and informal tree plantings and open space. It is also home to wildflower gardens, swimming and sailing beaches, a native bird habitat, picnic and play areas, and more. And at the north part of the park is the 8,900 square foot Lakeview Center, which was built in 1989, which houses offices, a shelter for summer camps, and space for small community events. Adjacent to Lakeview Center is Wallace Bowl, which is an outdoor venue with lawn and bleacher seating that was built in 1939 as part of the Works Progress Administration. The park has been enjoyed by locals and visitors for generations, including these assets that I've already mentioned. However, there's a comprehensive planning process being done right now by the Wilmette Park District Board that is currently considering changes to the park that would alter its passive design. Amongst the possible changes are adding roadways, parking areas, and other intrusive surfaces that put old growth trees and other open green space at risk. 5 design concepts for park changes have been proposed. Concept 1 is strongly preferred by park enthusiasts, as it would be the least intrusive and maintain the park's historic landscape while still making many long-needed improvements. Despite widespread public support for Concept 1, the Park District has delayed selecting an option and instead sought further cost estimates for all 5 options, including those that would be the most destructive to the park's passive and naturalistic design. A local group called Keep Gilson Green formed last year to educate the public about the history of the park and the possible intrusive changes that could take place there. It has also urged the Park District to make only minimal changes necessary to repair existing infrastructure and to adopt a master landscaping plan for Gilson Park. In October of 2021, again, despite resident objections, the Park District Board voted to expand Lakeview Center in the park, which residents believe will continue the Park District's effort to expand roads and parking. Neighborhood representative and co-founder of Keep Gilson Green, Mary Shea, said this, quote, "The park is so beloved and well used by many, not just Wilmette residents, and shows that the naturalistic character of its design has stood the test of time. The original architects had an understanding and appreciation of the land and its unique location. The original design reflects how people today continue to use and enjoy the park for walking, swimming, bird watching, and simply being in nature. The features which give the park its great appeal have so far been retained with an optimum traffic flow. While it is important to maintain the park, significant design changes are not needed, especially those that would alter its natural character with its majestic trees and open green space, end quote. If you are interested in helping join efforts to preserve Gilson Park, we urge you to speak to Wilmette Park District Board meetings and contact board members, asking them to support concept 1 of the 5 potential design concepts proposed by park consultants. Now, we feel it's imperative that the Park District officials maintain the historic landscape design of Gilson Park, respect its beloved natural space and heritage trees, and avoid building intrusive and unnecessary hard surfaces such as new roads and parking areas. On the screen now is contact information for the Wilmette Park District and how to submit public comments at upcoming Park District board meetings. You can also join Keep Gilson Green Facebook page for updates. Now that concludes my presentation of the 2022 Most Endangered Sites. Now, you may have noticed that our list is shorter than in previous years. It's true, and we see that as a positive. We are proud to report that our statewide advocacy work has been effective, resulting in a diminishing number of endangered places across Illinois. For instance, the Ward Chapel AME Church in Southern Illinois town of Cairo was not included on the most endangered list this year because of ongoing efforts by local advocates in partnership with Landmarks Illinois. Landmarks Illinois also recently awarded the Cairo Historical Preservation Project, incorporated a grant through our Preservation Heritage Fund to help the group make immediate necessary repairs to the church's roof. Ongoing advocacy efforts as well as publicity from the grant announcement have bolstered awareness of the nearly 150-year-old church and its preservation needs. Now, restoration work is ongoing, and Cairo Historical Preservation Project, Inc. continues to fundraise for resources needed to complete necessary repairs, and we continue to work together with them. Another property in Galesburg was actually taken off our most endangered list just a couple of weeks ago, thanks to preservation efforts. The Hawthorne Pool that you see pictured here opened in 1944 as part of a 155-acre U.S. Army hospital complex in Galesburg that served wounded World War II veterans. In the decades since, it has remained one of a few structures in the complex that has continued to be used for its historic purpose, a public indoor pool serving wounded veterans, physically challenged college students, and individuals suffering from mental illness, as well as serving the general public. Earlier this year, we were alerted by local advocates from the group Save Hawthorne Pool that the Galesburg City Council was planning to permanently close the pool in May. The city did not have a maintenance plan or available funding to make necessary repairs to keep the pool safe and open to the public. At that time, the city also did not announce any plans for the pool's future, putting it at risk of further neglect. In late March, however, the majority of members of the Galesburg City Council indicated that it was now in favor of rehabilitation and restoration of the pool. Now, we thank the Galesburg City Council members for recognizing the historic significance of the public pool and the need to invest in it so it can remain a valued and economically accessible public space. Landmarks Illinois has also been proud to partner with Save the Hawthorne Pool and other local advocates to bring attention to the historic public pool and aid in developing a preservation solution for it. Because of advocacy work and preservation partnerships like this, Landmarks Illinois has a more compact most endangered list this year. For the first time in the program's history, we have fewer than 10 sites included on this list. While other programs at Landmarks Illinois are growing, like our grants programs that provide critical funding to preservation projects at historic sites across the state, our most endangered program is shrinking, at least for now, and that is the goal. We thank our generous members and supporters for making it possible for us to work across the state with local advocates, elected officials, and preservation planners to provide resources to our historic places so that they never become endangered. We think this year's Most Endangered list is proof of our efforts are working and to help people save Illinois' historic places. We also often learn of threatened buildings after we have finalized the Most Endangered list. This is the case with the historic Antioch Missionary Baptist Church here in Chicago's Englewood neighborhood, an orange-rated building which had a devastating fire just days ago. A propane torch ignited the roof while it was being repaired. Now the fire was put out, but it reignited 3 days later, causing even further damage. City officials contacted us at Landmarks Illinois for building evaluation assistance on what could be saved, which is a unique service that we provide free of charge through the generous donations of pro bono service providers like WJE. We arranged for WJE with Janie Elsner, one of Landmarks Illinois' dedicated annual corporate sponsors, to confer with the Department of Buildings on the site just yesterday morning and evaluate the options. That's what these photos are from, in fact. The Antioch Church is one of many historic places damaged or destroyed by propane torches that are used to make roof repairs. Now, we commit to working with roofing contractors, the city, and preservation experts on training and policies to prevent this from happening again. Now, I want to open up our Q&A portion of today's announcements. I'm sure you have questions about the sites that we've listed or others across the state. And I encourage all members of the audience to ask us questions at this time about the 2022 Most Endangered, and I said as well, other advocacy projects that we may have in your community. To help answer, I would like to welcome onto the screen Lisa DiChiara, our Director of Advocacy, and Quinn Adamowski, our Regional Advocacy Manager. Now, if you are joining us on Zoom, you can type your questions into the Q&A feature, which you can click on at the bottom of your screen at the Zoom webinar screen. Lisa is going to be leading off our questions, and she's also going to make sure that we're watching on Facebook Live so we can catch your questions as well. So those joining us again on Facebook Live, just submit your questions in the comment section and we'll grab them and bring them here into the live video feed. So we are happy to start answering your questions at this point. Lisa, do you see any questions to answer?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Interestingly, the first question we have is about a building that is not on our endangered list. It's a question from David Gates regarding a historic post office in Des Plaines, and particularly the fate of its mural. It's interesting, historic WPA murals in post offices throughout the state often come to our attention, in other public buildings as well. The preservation of murals is always a question for a lot of communities, especially when post offices are deaccessioned or schools are closed. You know, that is something we're happy to talk to people about for particular buildings that are immediately in need based on their historic murals. So David, we encourage you to reach out to us after this presentation. We do have contacts in Des Plaines and happy to talk about it further. The other question that I see coming up right now in our chat is if Landmarks Illinois has ever worked with the Trust for Public Lands in connection with landmarks and notable properties on public lands. The Trust for Public Lands, no, Landmarks Illinois has never had a formal partnership with them. Certainly over the years, we've been in contact with them on different issues, but not specifically in relation to, for example, the Forest Preserve historic properties that we're bringing attention to today, the Pike House specifically, but we do have other historic properties that are threatened right now in other forest preserves, including Lake County's forest preserves, as well as Kane County's. In Lake County, we're particularly concerned right now with the Stevenson House. The future of the Stevenson House continues to be questioned by the board of the Lake County Forest Preserves, as well as some historic cabins in the Ryerson Conservation Area. Open Lands is an organization we continue to work with closely and to discuss these challenges with. And thank you for the suggestion of reaching out to the Trust for Public Lands. I'm also looking to see if there's any other questions. I'm mostly seeing comments. So thank you so much for that. I'm not sure if there's anything on Facebook right now.
Lisa, I see we just had a question come in, and thank you for those who are sending positive remarks. We appreciate that the presentation is helpful to you and interesting. Lisa, I think it's about the groups that support theater restoration. So if you see that, is there a group that is out there like us that helps with theater restoration?
Well, you know, there is not one particular organization. There is a group called the Theater Historical Society that used to be based here in Chicago, but now is based in the Pittsburgh area, that mostly is an archival organization and used to hold small conferences for you know, people who are involved in historic theaters. Most groups that organize are around the specific efforts of individual theaters. We're involved with efforts with the Massac Theater in Metropolis and far southern Illinois. Of course, we continue to keep our eye on what's going on with the Uptown Theater, the new Regal Theater here in Chicago. There's many theater efforts throughout the state. And again, if there's a specific theater that you are concerned about, please let us know. I also see there's some questions coming in about the Century and Consumers building, specifically about the challenges that have been really a problem with the future of these buildings as it relates to safety and the judiciary next door in the Dirksen Courthouse. As we understand it, the fear of judges that are officed in that building is windows that face directly toward the Dirksen from those buildings, although one building doesn't have many windows, but the other does. But I know that there had been discussions between CA Ventures and the city about the different kinds of ways that those windows could be stabilized and secured to make sure that they were not readily available as ways to view upon the Dirksen Courthouse. You know, the GSA has expertise when it comes to security, working with many experts as it relates to all, you know, the security of all government buildings. There's also many courthouses in dense urban areas throughout the nation. So this is not unique to have other privately owned or leased buildings that are adjacent to federal courthouses. So it is perplexing as to why the judiciary does not believe that the solutions that have been proposed in the past by GSA are not sufficient. So as we understand it at this point, it is $52 million that has been allocated for the demolition of the entire half block. Again, why some of those monies cannot be used to help with some of these security concerns is really not something any of us fully understand. And also Preservation Chicago has been talking to officials about other types of tenants that could come into that building, an archive, for example, where windows obviously would not even be needed. Homeland Security is an entity also that works regularly with GSA. So we do believe there's always going to be a solution. I'm also seeing a question here regarding the Pike House. Someone named Fran is asking if indeed $750,000 was allocated for demolition. I do want to make it clear that $750,000 was not allocated for demolition of the Pike House. It was a misunderstanding within the published budget of the Forest Preserve District of Cook County. It was in regards to a different Watchmen residence. So that is the good news, is that that is not a budgeted line item, but the Forest Preserve District of Cook County, you know, will maintain the Pike House on their long-term demolition list if indeed a use cannot be found. And that is just a necessity from their perspective, that if they can't find a viable user and viable funding for the house, that they have to maintain it on that demolition list, even though it's at the bottom of the list, essentially. We're just really excited in terms of recent conversations we've had with officials there. They do indeed hope by the end of this month to issue a new what's called RFEI, expressions of interest. We're really hoping that between preservation, planning, economic and community development organizations, that they will look at this property as an opportunity to partner with others in terms of finding a reuse for the building that would benefit the community. I'm looking here, Andy Pierce has asked, is there any movement on the Uptown Theater? As far as I understand, things are status quo there. The building is being maintained. And I think there is still a funding gap in terms of the actual full rehabilitation being launched. Of course, you know, we only know as much information regarding that as what is printed in the press. And as long as at this point we hear there's nothing with the building that is detrimental, we just continue to monitor it and ask city officials quarterly what the status is of the building.
Lisa, I've also been watching the chat. We have some questions coming in. I know you're answering the Q&A, but when you're done, I want to let everybody know who's put questions in the chat. We'll get to them as well.
Mike Jackson is asking, are there any noteworthy projects from last year that are worth an update? And I will say that we have received interesting information that the Scott Forsman complex, the former corporate headquarters in Glenview, there is a potential buyer right now for that building and for that property. And we're hopeful that this potential buyer will do the right thing with reuse. And there has been some recent press on that. So we continue to have conversations and hoping that indeed that will be the outcome.
Lisa, I can also, I was looking at our, you know, all of the items that we can update. So why don't I give you some prompts on that and we can fill in. So can you tell us about Altgeld Gardens from 2021?
Sure. Some of you may recall that at Altgeld Gardens on the far south side of Chicago, that last year we included 2 school buildings and their commercial building that is locally lovingly called Up Top, a Keck and Keck designed mid-century building. While there's been no movement on these buildings individually, the good news is Chicago Public Schools did not proceed with demolishing School Building C. When we did include these buildings on our endangered list, it was the Chicago Public Schools' intention to demolish that building, and they have held off. So that is good news. The second good news is that the entire campus of Altgeld Gardens, the entire residential campus, has now officially been listed in the National Register of Historic Places. And that is the result of years worth of advocacy on the part of many partners, and the outcome of a what we call a Section 106 process with the State Historic Preservation Office. And the good news is that that means that certain buildings like School Building C and like the Up Top could be rehabilitated in the future using federal and state historic tax credits.
Lisa, how about we have great news on Thompson Center? Could you give an update on that as well?
Sure. So Thompson Center, of course, was not only on our endangered list last year, but several years prior to that, on Preservation Chicago's list as well, and on the National Trust for Historic Preservation national endangered list. So a lot of attention to Thompson Center over the years. Many folks do know that the state of Illinois did issue an RFP, or it may have been an RFI, I can't remember now, to seek sale proposals for the building. And as far as we know, one had come through that was for demolition and replacement. One had come through that was for purchase and rehabilitation and reuse. Unfortunately, that is the proposal that was selected. So as of now, the Thompson Center is under contract with a developer that does plan to rehabilitate it and reuse it.
Lisa, I think there are two more at least that we could talk about very quickly. The Broadview Hotel, which was listed as an example of the need for the RERZ tax credit to be, to be renewed. So there's news on that one, and then the Green Book sites. Can you update us on those, or else I can fill in as well.
Go ahead, Bonnie.
So for those out there, the listing last year of several properties, including the Broadview Hotel located in East St. Louis, it was considered a poster child for the identification of the need to renew our River Edge Redevelopment Zone historic tax credit. Now, we've helped to put in place an additional tax credit that's available all across the state, and thanks to our partners at the State Historic Preservation Office for administering that. And I know Stacy Fingston is here from AIA, the American Institute of Architects Illinois, who is our partner in helping to renew these tax credits as well. But we were collectively successful in renewing the River Edge. So that project is going forward with affordable housing in East St. Louis by developer Yafet El Amin. So efficacy development. So we're very excited to see that going forward. And the listing of our Green Book sites was also very successful to bring attention to the need for immediate preservation of the sites that remain. Some of you may recall that of the cataloging of what was originally in the Green Book from when it was published in the 1930s to the 1960s, there was roughly 280 to 300 properties that were listed. And if I remember correctly, it was roughly 80% to 90% of those were gone. So it is imperative that we advocate for protecting the Green Book sites that are still extant, and also ensuring that we understand what the experience was of Black business owners and Black travelers along the Green Book sites in Illinois, especially along Route 66. And we're partnering with our board member, Stacy Grundy, who is the co-founder of Route History Incorporated in Springfield, to actually do an oral history project. Together with them, we received some funding from Illinois Humanities. Thank you, Illinois Humanities, to conduct oral histories, which will be led by Route History. So we have some progress there, at least to capture the stories, and we continue to catalog. So if you find Green Book sites, please let us know as well. I think those are the main
Bonnie,
updates.
Ward Miller's just did post a question about Antioch Church again. Obviously getting the recent news that it is supposed to be demolished as of today due to the unfortunate devastating fire that occurred on Good Friday. And our analysis, Ward, from Wish-Janie Elsner's visit there was that the only portion of the building that really seemed fully possibly salvageable is the tower, and that the walls would need to be immediately braced. And what is not clear is obviously what the abilities were in a short order of time, because that bracing would have needed to happen immediately, especially due to the fact that a school is adjacent to the church. So it is a tragedy, as Bonnie noted, and was also published in a very good editorial by the Chicago Sun-Times. It's very clear that new policy is needed regarding heat-related tools. Too many times our historic buildings have been devastated by the use of these types of tools like heat torches. Pilgrim Baptist Church obviously being one of the most famous buildings that fell victim to that type of tool. And we will willingly work with the city on policies that address this issue.
Lisa, can I feed you? And we have a couple general questions that you and Quinn can answer. So what assistance do we provide to help with the historic reuse of structures in some way? So what resources and tools does Landmarks Illinois provide? And I think that feeds into the question about whether or not we have grant funds available. Could you guys take that question?
Sure, I can take it first and then let Quinn add if he would like. So, one thing that we do that we feel very proud of is that we have some really wonderful partnerships and relationships with experienced firms in all areas of building rehabilitation. I earlier mentioned was Jani Elsner. We have many contractors, architecture firms, conservationists, and specialists. And often what we will do is, especially for nonprofit organizations, for churches, we will often provide pro bono assistance for building owners when it comes to condition assessments and getting other types of understanding of priority needed repairs. We will do this sometimes with other commercial buildings as well. We also always provide information to historic building owners about the different types of financial incentives that are available, how to qualify for those incentives. Sometimes those incentives rely on different types of landmark or National Register designation, or at least understanding of eligibility. We also work with locals on things like different kinds of regulatory reviews when it comes to working with the State Historic Preservation Office, who are our partners in Springfield, who are with us today and are invaluable in all of the advocacy work we do throughout the state, because our State Historic Preservation Office in Springfield runs multiple programs that we all are very dependent upon. So not only the National Register program, also, as I mentioned earlier, the Section 106 program, the Section 707 program, which are the state and federal level regulatory reviews that happen for historic properties that are impacted by federal or state funding or permitting needs. Also, they run the state and the federal historic tax credit programs for all buildings that qualify for those incentives. So I want to acknowledge the State Historic Preservation Office, which is housed within the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. And again, they will continue to be invaluable partners as it especially pertains to the consumer and century buildings going forward, owned by GSA. Quinn, if you'd like to say anything further, please feel free.
As always, Lisa, that was very thorough. I feel like you covered most of what we do. Bonnie did mention the grants, so I'll just speak to those briefly. We do have 3 grant programs, the Preservation Heritage Fund and the Donnelly Preservation Fund are statewide opportunities for organizations who are looking for seed money to do an evaluation of property or look at adaptive reuse options, or bring in a firm to take a look at potential reuses and a variety of others. And I would encourage everyone to go to landmarks.org and look at those grant programs. We also have another grant program that was more recent, the Timeo Black grant program that's focused on the south side of Chicago, along the same lines, looking at different ways to preserve the historic properties and resources we have on Chicago south side. And all that, again, can be found on our website.
And Bonnie, I did just see that someone did just ask if there are other public parks like Gilson Park that Landmarks Illinois has recognized on our endangered list in the past. Yes, probably one of the most prominent is Promontory Point in Hyde Park. And Promontory Point is a really important lakeside park where for many, many years there have been discussions by the Chicago Park District and the Army Corps of Engineers about ways to best deal with the revetment. It is a historic limestone revetment, which preservation and community advocates really want to see preserved and believe can be preserved. There continues to be discussion about rebuilding that revetment with concrete and not preserving the limestone, which we believe would be a mistake. So if there is anyone interested in the ongoing efforts to advocate for Promontory Point, please reach out to me and I can connect you to the local advocates working on that issue.
Lisa, Quinn, right now we have one open question in our Q&A, and then there was a question Alyssa added in the chat. If we can take one short moment. So Lisa, is there an estimate of how much it would cost to address the safety concerns of basically the Century and Consumers building?
No, I don't think there's a specific cost on how to address the safety concerns.
Okay.
I think because it's not understood yet even what those various solutions may be that the GSA hopefully will still be exploring with the judiciary.
I think, you know, Alyssa, your question, as you noted, is outside of the most endangered historic places. So unfortunately, we have to close our program, but hopefully Lisa can answer that for you at another time about our work on enforcement and monitoring with the Chicago Department of Buildings for essentially building collapses. So we're going to close that at this moment, and I'm otherwise going to close us out. So I'd like to, again, you know, thank you. If we didn't get to your question, if you weren't able to put it into the chat or the Q&A, we certainly encourage you to visit our website and learn how you can get in touch with us about the 2022 Most Endangered, as well as any other, you know, preservation opportunities or challenges that you have in your community. I mean, we're very thankful this virtual Most Endangered list allows anybody across the state to participate, and we hope that you will continue to engage with us. You can also find all of our calls to action for these endangered places, as well as other resources to help you advocate for their preservation on our website, again, landmarks.org. And I just have to say, if you're not already a member of Landmarks Illinois, I ask you to consider joining today to support this important mission-driven advocacy work through the state. You are helping to make our impact greater, and we appreciate each and every member and donor. So thank you. Our monthly giving program, just to tell you, we now have monthly giving available, which allows you to set a recurring gift level that works within your budget as well. So I encourage you all to stay tuned next week for a big announcement that we have on a new program that we are launching in Southern Illinois. So we have more to come. Make sure you check out our social media channels, our website, subscribe to our email newsletters. They are free to hear more about this program as well as our other work. We're going to be in Marion, Illinois next Tuesday to announce this new program, just to let you know. And if you're a member of the press that's with us in Southern Illinois and you want to know more, please reach out to our communications manager, Caitlin McAvoy. So once again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us here today to learn about our 2022 Most Endangered Historic Places in Illinois. Please stay involved with us at Landmarks Illinois and help us to preserve these important places. Help people save places for people. Thank you again, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.